Hello everyone, and thank you for listening to the Advanced Google Analytics Workshop. To go over the agenda, we'll first start off by quickly going over what a measurement plan is and how it can help us when working with Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. Then we'll talk about Google Tag Manager, so what it is, as well as applications. And for the applications, we'll specifically talk about creating event goals with Google Tag Manager. Then I'll go over some tips and best practices to keep in mind when working with Google Tag Manager and events. Before we begin the review, I'll demo what creating a tag in Google Tag Manager looks like, as well as give you all a bit of time to practice with measurement plans and Google Tag Manager. Of course, if you have any questions on any of the content we'll cover in this workshop, please feel free to email us at webservices@georgetown.edu. All right, so let's first talk about what a measurement plan is. A measurement plan is going to be a plan that helps provide a clear definition of your website goals and objectives, as well as your progress towards those goals that you've set. So it's a great resource to have to act as a benchmark and make sure you're on the right track. And typically, these measurement plans are done in a group setting with people from your department and are distributed amongst department members so everyone knows what it is we're trying to track. So there are three main parts to a measurement plan: the objectives, the key performance indicators, and the measurement metrics. The objectives are going to be really high level in general and answer questions like, what is the purpose of your site? The key performance indicators are going to help you identify what you will be using to measure success. So what are we using to measure if we've reached those objectives? And the measurement metrics are going to refer to the specific target numbers we set for each goal. And so a good measurement plan is going to cover three areas: acquisition, behavior, and outcomes. For acquisition, you should cover how you're planning to acquire traffic and what channels you want to prioritize. So this can be something like, are we prioritizing organic traffic over referral traffic? The next section you'll want to cover is behavior. So what are you expecting your users to do when they arrive at your site? Are you expecting them to sign up for a newsletter or download a form? Next, you'll want to make sure you cover outcomes. So thinking about what outcomes deliver value to your department. So you want to think back to your website goals and your business objectives and make sure that your goals and objectives are set with a purpose and that the information you are measuring is going to be of value to your department. So it's really important that we're creating a comprehensive measurement plan in order to help us stay organized and track our progress towards these goals that we're going to set. So now let's move on to the actual steps to creating a measurement plan. And there's going to be 5. The first step is going to be to identify your business objectives. So you can have a few different objectives for your department, and you'll typically have between 1 to 3 objectives. Your objectives are going to be broad topics that answer questions like, why does your website exist? And what is the purpose of your website? An example of an objective could be to build a relationship with my users. So once you have your objectives set, you'll then want to identify goals for each objective. So if you had 2 objectives, you'll want to have at least 1 goal for each of those 2 objectives. Your goals should be specific, actionable, measurable, and understandable. So for the objective we set earlier, which was to build a relationship with your users, one goal could be to establish a way to communicate with your users. So we can see here that that goal is going to help us build a relationship with our users. Another goal could be to increase community participation in department events. So again, the goals you set should help you achieve your objectives. Now, once you've set your goals, you'll then want to set your key performance indicators for each goal. And these are going to help you understand how you're doing against your objectives. So for the goal of establishing a way to communicate with users, a key performance indicator could be conversions on newsletter signups. Now, if you remember, we said our goals need to be specific and measurable. So the next step is going to be to identify a target for each key performance indicator. So the target is going to be that predetermined numerical value that is going to let us know if we've achieved our goals or not. This could look something like 20 signups a month. And notice how I added an element of time. When we note our targets, we want to make sure they are time-bound. This way, we know that after a month, we should have received X amount of signups. If we forget to add the time element, we'll never know when we should be checking back to see if we've met our goals. The last step is going to be to identify valuable segments for analysis. So this goes back to the acquisition part of a measurement plan and thinking about which groups of people and sources are going to be the most important for the goals and objectives we set. This could be something like prioritizing new users over returning users, or prioritizing traffic coming from social media versus direct or organic traffic. So once you've completed your measurement plan, it's important to share it with the members of your department and get feedback from them. That way you can ensure everyone is on the same page and the objectives and goals you set are going to be of value to your department. Now let's move on to Google Tag Manager. And Google Tag Manager is a tool that is going to allow you to manage and deploy tags on your site without actually having to go in and edit the code. So typically without Google Tag Manager, when you wanted to create something like an event goal, you would have to manually add the tag into the code of your website. And so Google Tag Manager allows us to manage tags on our site without having to edit any code, which is going to make things a lot simpler for us and also make things go a little bit faster as well. And there's three main parts to Google Tag Manager: the tags, the triggers, and the variables. The tags are the snippets of code that tell Google Tag Manager exactly what to do. And you can actually use Google Tag Manager for different things other than Google Analytics. So because of that, there are going to be different types of tags. There's the Google Analytics Universal Tracking Code tag, which is the one we're going to be working with, but there are also tags for things like Google AdWords remarketing. The triggers are going to be what fires your tag. So these are going to tell Google Tag Manager when to do what it is you want it to do. And there are a bunch of different triggers in Google Tag Manager. To give some examples, you can have triggers for things like page views, for different clicks like link clicks, and you can even have triggers for page depth scrolling. Variables in Google Analytics are going to be any additional information that Google Tag Manager may need. A common variable we'll be using is the Google Analytics Tracking ID number. And this is going to be how we will tell Google Tag Manager that we want to connect the Google Tag Manager account with a Google Analytics account. So now that we know more about the anatomy of Google Tag Manager, what can we actually do with it? Well, like I mentioned, Google Tag Manager can be used to track different events like PDF downloads, clicks on a button, scroll tracking, and tracking views on embedded videos. We can also use Google Tag Manager for AdWords conversion tracking and dynamic remarketing. But today, we'll just focus on events. So like I said, Google Tag Manager can be used to track events, which you can then use to create an event goal in Google Analytics. So now I want to talk a little bit about what an event is. An event is a user interaction with content on your site that can be measured. And this can be almost anything. It can be a download of an application form, a click on a link or a button, a form submission, or a video play or stop. An event consists of four components: a category, an action, a label, and a value. A category is going to be the general name of the objects you want to analyze. So this can be something like videos or downloads. An action is going to be the event or interaction you want to measure. So this one's pretty self-explanatory. It could be something like playing or stopping a video or clicking on a download link. The label is going to be any additional information needed for the event. So if you were tracking plays on a video, the label could be the video title. Or if you were tracking downloads of a PDF, the label could be the name of the file. The last component of an event is the value. And the value is optional, and it's going to be the numerical value you assign to the object. So this could be something like a 10-second load time. So it's going to depend on what type of event you're going to track. That's going to determine whether or not you're going to be adding a value. Now that we know a little bit more about what an event is, let's talk about how we'll create an event tag in Google Tag Manager, an event goal in Google Analytics. And I'll do a demo of how this is done, but for now, I'll just walk you through the steps. To create an event tag in Google Tag Manager, you first want to log in to your account. Then you're going to select the tags option from the left-hand side. You'll want to create a new tag. When creating the tag, remember you can create tags for different platforms. So for the purposes of this example, you'll want to select the Universal Analytics as the tag type. You'll then select Event as the track type, since we're creating an event tag. Once you've selected the tag type, it'll open up a section where you can set your event category, action, label, and value if it's applicable. Now, once you've filled out your event information, you'll then set your Google Analytics settings variable. And this is a step that's going to link your Google Tag Manager event to Google Analytics. Once you've configured the tag, you're then going to set the trigger. So this is going to be where you tell Google Tag Manager when you want it to fire the tag. So do you want it to fire when it's on a certain page, when someone clicks on a link, or maybe when someone is downloading something? Once you've set your trigger, you'll then want to test your tag by clicking on the preview button. Once you're in the preview mode, you want to set off your trigger to make sure that the tag is working as expected. Once everything is working as you want it to, you're then ready to submit your changes in Google Tag Manager. And once you've done that, you've already done about 80 to 90% of the work. Creating the event Google Analytics is going to be pretty easy. For the event goal in Google Analytics, you first need to log in and then go to Admin, then Goals, and click on Add New Goal. Once you're there, you'll want to name your goal and select the Event Goal option. Be sure to name your goal something intuitive so people know exactly what it is you're trying to track. Once you've selected the Event Goal option, it's going to open up fields for the category, action, label, and value fields. Once you're here, you're going to want to input the information exactly how you did in Google Tag Manager into Google Analytics. So if you put video as your category in Google Tag Manager, you want to put video as your Google Analytics category as well. Once you've filled in the fields exactly how you did in Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics, you can then save the goal and test it to make sure you're receiving the data in Google Analytics. Now, before I demo creating a tag and an event goal, I wanted to go over some best practices and things to keep in mind when creating tags and events. First, let's start with the action and label best practices. The first one is going to be that action names should be relevant to your report data. So this relates to how your data is going to be appearing in Google Analytics. For events, Google Analytics will combine metrics for the same actions across different categories. So if you're using the action click for both the downloads and videos category, the metrics for the action click are going to appear together. So it's important to reference your measurement plan and know what data you want to track and how you want it to appear in Google Analytics. This way, you can plan to use unique action labels for distinct categories if it's needed. This kind of plays into the next tip, which is to use action names to either aggregate or distinguish user interactions. So again, you want to think about how you want your data to appear and what user interactions are most important to you. So say you have an event with the category videos and the action play, but you want to separate between Mac and Windows users. You can create two separate events with unique actions such as play-Mac and play-Windows. This way, you're able to distinguish between those two segments. Another thing to keep in mind is that an action does not always have to be an action. So for example, say your category was downloads, but the action click doesn't really give you any additional information that you need. Instead, you could use file types for the action field like PDF or doc. Another thing to keep in mind is that a unique event is incremented by a unique action. Basically what this means is that if you're tracking plays on a video and a user plays the video twice in the same session, this will only count as one unique event for that particular action. Now let's go over non-interaction events. And a bounce will occur if a user visits your site and leaves without taking any additional action. And so in order for something to be counted as an action, you must set up an event or a goal. So if you want your event to impact your bounce rate and count as taking an action, you want to make sure that you set the non-interaction event to false. If you don't want it to affect your bounce rate, you want to make sure that the non-interaction event is set to true. Now let's talk about event implementation. It's important to determine in advance all the elements you want to analyze and subsequently how you want your event measurement reports. This is where having that measurement plan set up beforehand is going to be super helpful. With the measurement plan, we'll know what key performance indicators we want to track and the most important segments to look at, so we'll be able to name our events in a way that will bring value to our department goals and our data reports. Another tip is to adopt a consistent and clear naming convention for both events and tags. This will help keep everything organized and keep everyone on the same page. And I'll go over some naming conventions when I start the demo. When you log into Google Tag Manager, you're going to see something that looks like this. I'm going to go over to the left-hand side and click on tags. Here, I'll be able to see all the tags that I've created if I have any. And to create a new one, I'm going to go over to the right and click on New. Once I'm here, I'll be able to name my tag, configure my tag, and then also configure my trigger. So for this example, I'm going to go over to the website I'm going to track on. And over here, I can see the Be Prepared button. And I want to track clicks on this Be Prepared button right here. So I'm going to go ahead and name my tag. Let's go over how I named this tag. So you can choose any naming convention that is going to be helpful to your department, but to go over what I just used, I first started by specifying what type of tag this was. So if you remember, we can create tags for different platforms. And so for this one, it's going to be for Google Analytics. So I put the Google Analytics abbreviation. I then specified what type of tag it was. It's an event tag. And then specifically what it was that I wanted to track. So Be Prepared button. Once I've made my tag, I'm going to go ahead and click on Tag Configuration. Now I'm going to choose my tag type. So again, this is for Google Analytics. So I'm going to hit the Google Analytics Universal Analytics option. Now I'm going to select my track type. And again, I wanted to create an event tag. So I'm going to go ahead and click Event. This is going to open the category, action, label, and value fields. So for category, I'm going to put button. For action, I'm going to put click. For label, I'm going to put Be Prepared, since I want to track the Be Prepared button. I could then add a value if it's applicable. Now I'm going to look at my non-interaction hit. And since I do want this event to count as an action, I do want it to affect the bounce rate on my site, I'm going to leave it as false. Now I'm going to set my Google Analytics settings. So over here, I'm going to select my Google Analytics settings variable. And this will already be a variable on your Google Tag Manager account once you have it set up. And so this is going to link my event tag that I'm creating right now to my Google Analytics account. Once I've configured my tag, I'm going to go ahead and do my trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the triggering section and choose a trigger. Since I don't have a trigger that I want already created, I'm going to go ahead and click on this plus sign and create one. Now I'm going to name my trigger. I'm going to start with the action that I want, so click, and then what it is that we're clicking on, so the Be Prepared button. So this is a naming convention for triggers. It can be the action and then what it is that you're taking the action on. I'm going to go ahead and click here on trigger configuration. And now I'm going to choose the trigger type. So if you remember, there's a bunch of different triggers that you can set. You can have ones for page views, for clicks, for user engagement. So for this purposes, I'm going to go under the clicks and do all elements. So what this is saying right now is that this is going to fire the tag whenever a click is made on the site. Since I don't want the tag to fire whenever any click is made anywhere on the site, I'm going to go ahead and change that to some clicks. Now I have to tell Google Tag Manager what conditions this tag should fire on. So going back to this page over here, since I want it to fire whenever this Be Prepared button is being clicked, I'm going to go ahead and choose over here to the click URL. I'm going to change this to equals. I'm going to go back to my site and copy the URL that the button has. Now I'm going to go ahead and paste that URL right over here. So what this is saying is that this is going to fire when the click URL is equal to this one right here. I am able to add other conditions if I wanted to right here, and I can take them away by clicking on this minus sign. So say I had multiple Be Prepared buttons on my site, and I only wanted to track clicks on the Be Prepared button when it's on the home page. What I could do is add another condition for the page URL when it equals the home page. So Now what this is saying is that it's going to fire this tag if the click URL equals this URL right here, only if the page that it's on is equal to this one right here. But since I only have one be prepared button on this site, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that condition. Once I've configured my trigger, I'm going to click Save. Now I have my tag configured and my trigger, so I'm going to save this tag. Now it's time to test to see if the tag is working as I want it to. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the preview button. I'll hit start. Now this is going to be in the preview mode. So what I want to do is click on my button right here that I wanted to track and that I created the tag for and see if the tag is being fired. So when I go over here, I can see right here the tags that have not been fired. So this is the one that we just created, right? The Google Analytics event be prepared button. So I can see right here that it's under the tags not fired. When I go on the website and I'm clicking over here, I can see over here that my tag wasn't fired yet because I didn't click on that be prepared button, but I can see that it is being tracked over here by clicks. Now I'm going to go over here and hit Control click, and that's just going to open that up in a new tab. So since I did click on that button, that means that the tag should have fired now. So I'm going to go back over here, and you can see that it has moved into the tags fired section. And you can see that it's been fired one time. If you want to double check to see that it is working again properly, I can go ahead and do that again. So I'm clicking on that be prepared button, going back over here, and now I can see that it was fired 2 times. So awesome, that means that our tag was working just as we wanted it to. So now that I know that my tag is working just as expected, I can go ahead and hit submit. And that's just going to submit the changes that I've made in Google Tag Manager. Since this is just an example, I'm not going to hit submit today. Now that I've created my event tag in Google Tag Manager, I need to create my event goal in Google Analytics. So I'm going to go over to admin. Then under view, I'm going to hit goals. Now I'm going to hit new goal. Now I have to name my goal. So I'm going to hit the prepared button. Since this is going to be an event goal, I'm going to hit event. Then continue. Now I want to fill in my category, action, label, and value fields just as I did in Google Tag Manager. So I'll go ahead and do button, click, and be prepared. It's important to enter your category, action, label, and value fields exactly how you did in Google Tag Manager. Once I've done this, it's as easy as clicking save and the goal will be created. Now that we've gone over what it's like to create an event tag in Google Tag Manager and an event goal in Google Analytics, let's take the time to practice on your own. Let's check out our measurement plan template. Use this template and take the time to plan out your objectives, goals, key performance indicators, targets, and segments. Make sure you're thinking about your department and website goals when you're filling out this template and setting goals that will bring value to your department. Once you finish your measurement plan, take a second to look at the Google Tag Manager practice example. Since we don't all have access to Google Tag Manager, you can use this template to practice how you'll configure your tag and triggers in Google Tag Manager. You can fill in the text in the text boxes, as well as clicking and dragging the boxes into the empty fields here. Just to note that not all these options are going to be used, so make sure you're thinking about the best way to configure your tag and your trigger. All right, I hope you all had a good time practicing creating your measurement plan and a tag. Of course, if you had any questions during the activity, feel free to email us at webservices@georgetown.edu, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Now let's move on to the review. We first talked about creating a measurement plan and how it will help provide a clear definition of our objectives, goals, and progress towards those goals that we're setting. We talked about the 3 different parts of Google Tag Manager, so the tags, triggers, and variables, as well as what kind of things we can track with events. So you can track things like PDF downloads, clicks on buttons, or video views. We also talked about the steps to creating an event tag in Google Tag Manager and an event goal in Google Analytics, as well as the 4 different components of an event: the category, action, label, and value. We also talked about non-interaction events, so if we wanted our event to have an impact on a bounce rate or not. And of course, the importance of adopting a clear and consistent naming convention for our events and tags. With that being said, this concludes our Advanced Google Analytics workshop. We encourage you to check out the other workshops that we have on content strategy if you haven't done so already, as well as look out for our upcoming search engine optimization workshop. If you have any questions about any of the content that was covered today, or if you would like us to set up your Google Tag Manager account, feel free to email us at webservices@georgetown.edu. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed it.